The notification came through just as I was fastening a necklace for one of my customers. My boutique was bathed in late afternoon light, the soft, golden glow bouncing off racks of silk dresses and glass display cases. I remember the exact vibration in my hand, the short buzz of my phone, the way my heart seemed to pause mid-beat before I even read the words. Anna, I'm leaving you. I'm moving to Miami with Sophie. She's 22. I've emptied our joint account. Don't bother calling. David. My hands didn't tremble as I clasped the necklace. My voice didn't falter as I complimented Mrs. Daniels on her choice. The only visible sign that my husband of 12 years had just detonated our marriage with a text message was the faint tightening at the corners of my eyes. That and the way the words seared into my brain like fire across dry grass. When the door chimed and Mrs. Daniels left her purchase wrapped neatly in silver tissue, I finally looked back down at the screen. I studied the message like it belonged to someone else's life. A cruel joke, a mistake. No, I'd known deep down this was coming. The tone was exactly David's smug dismissive, written with the confidence of a man who thought he'd won. I slid the phone into my pocket, locked the front door of the boutique, and let out the breath I'd been holding all afternoon. The sun was setting outside, painting the sidewalks of Main Street in copper and amber. Inside, silence hummed in my ears. The only thing louder was the voice in my head whispering, "It's time." The truth is, I'd seen the storm gathering for months, the late nights that didn't line up with his pay stubs, the sudden burst of gym visits cologne stronger than his sense of loyalty. The unexplained receipts, the guarded way he cradled his phone like it was a second skin. He thought he was clever, but David had always underestimated me. 3 months earlier, I'd found a hotel bill tucked in his glove compartment, a romantic suite for two. The date matched the night he'd sworn he was working late, pushing through endless paperwork at the dealership. That was the night I walked into a different kind of office, my lawyer's. I remember the click of the pen as she slid papers across the desk, her calm tone as she explained my options. "Preparation isn't paranoia, Anna," she'd said. "It's protection." So I had prepared. A new bank account. Under my name alone. Savings transferred carefully, leaving just enough in our joint account to keep him unsuspecting. Copies of every suspicious transaction filed neatly into a growing binder. Notes documenting every lie he'd told. And of course, the house deed my grandmother's house left to me long before David entered the picture. My name only, no amendments. Now, standing alone in the boutique, I felt none of the panic David must have imagined. He pictured me crying on the floor, devastated, begging him to reconsider. Instead, I walked to the back office, poured myself a glass of water, and opened my laptop. My fingers didn't shake as I logged into my new bank account and confirmed every dollar I'd saved was safe. The joint account he bragged about emptying. It held just enough to cover 2 months of bills. He thought he'd taken everything. He had no idea how little that meant. My phone buzzed again. "Don't beg Anna. You're almost 40. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." I laughed out loud at that. My little shop, the boutique I'd built from the ground up, the one that earned more in a month than his sales job did in 3. The business I'd deliberately kept separate, incorporated under my name alone, immune to his grasping hands. Another message followed. "Sophie understands me. She makes me feel alive again. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll meet someone your age." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my evidence folder and added screenshots of his texts one by one, neatly labeled with dates and times. Every word was another nail in the coffin of his case. By the time the streetlights flickered on outside, I had a plan. Tomorrow I'd call my lawyer. Tomorrow the divorce papers she'd already prepared would be filed. Tonight I would sip the Cabernet I'd been saving for a special occasion. Because if David thought his message marked the end of my story, he was wrong. It was only the prologue to his unraveling. The boutique smelled faintly of lavender and leather as I locked up the sound of the key turning firm in my hand. My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked home, each step measured, each breath steady. The night was cool and the stars blinked with quiet certainty. David imagined he'd broken me with a single text. What he didn't realize was that I'd been building my fortress long before his betrayal. Brick by brick, file by file, detail by detail. He thought he had the upper hand, but the only thing he really had was a flight to Miami that would soon vanish beneath him. As I climbed the porch steps of my grandmother's house, I felt the weight of 12 years begin to slide off my shoulders. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. I poured the wine, raised my glass to the quiet room, and whispered to myself, "Let the game begin." I didn't need David's smug text to tell me our marriage had been dying for months. The truth had been creeping in like a draft under a closed door, chilling the edges of my life long before he confessed his betrayal outright. It started subtly. A new cologne that clung to his shirts with a musk that wasn't mine. Gym memberships he never used before paired with clothes that fit tighter than his dignity. His phone, once left on the counter without thought, now carried from room to room, face-down notifications silenced. Late-night paperwork again, I'd asked one evening as he adjusted his tie in the mirror. His reflection had avoided mine. "End of quarter," he muttered. "Deals don't close themselves, Anna." But the glow of satisfaction in his eyes wasn't the exhaustion of hard work. It was the gleam of a man holding a secret, a man tasting freedom he hadn't yet earned. I learned quickly not to argue, not because I was afraid, but because silence gave me space to listen more carefully. His lies echoed louder when I didn't interrupt. The breaking point came 3 months ago when I was cleaning out the glove compartment of his car. Beneath registration papers and expired coupons was a folded slip of paper, a receipt from the Mariner, the most expensive restaurant in town. Dinner for 2, complete with champagne. The date stamped across the top was the same night he'd sworn he was stuck at work, drowning in spreadsheets. My hands had stilled on the steering wheel, but inside something in me clicked awake. That night, after he went to bed, smelling faintly of that new cologne, I pulled out my laptop and searched for local family law attorneys. By morning, I had an appointment scheduled. The office was cool and professional, lined with books whose spines promised order in the chaos of broken vows. Across the polished desk, my lawyer, Ms. Grant, slid a notepad toward me. "Tell me what's happening," she said gently. I laid out the signs, the receipts, the passwords, changed the missing deposits, the sudden obsession with youth. My voice didn't shake. If anything, it grew stronger with each detail. Ms. Grant nodded. "Preparation is the best protection. Start gathering documentation, bank statements, texts, anything unusual. Keep your finances separate. Don't confront him yet. Let him think he's in control." Control. That was David's favorite illusion. So I began my quiet project. At the boutique, between greeting customers and managing shipments, I organized my evidence. Receipts into one folder, screenshots into another. Each suspicious charge labeled, each inconsistency noted. It became almost clinical, like tracking a patient's symptoms before a diagnosis. I opened a new account at a different bank, my maiden name on the papers, no joint access. I funneled my personal savings there discreetly, leaving just enough in our shared account to avoid suspicion. The boutique's profits. Untouched safely separate under my corporation's name. David had always called it our little hobby. He'd never once asked to see the incorporation papers, never realized his name appeared nowhere on them. Every evening, as he stumbled in late with excuses that grew flimsier by the week, I smiled, kissed his cheek, and noted the scent of perfume that wasn't mine. Let him think I was blind. Let him believe I was too busy with my little shop to notice. Inside, I was a storm gathering strength. One night, while folding laundry, I noticed his gym shorts still crisp with new creases, tags barely snipped. I laughed softly to myself. He wasn't chasing fitness. He was chasing time, desperately dressing himself in youth like it could hide the softening belly beneath. "Long day," I asked when he wandered in shirt unbuttoned too low for his age. "Yeah," he said, grabbing a beer. "But Sophie." He stopped biting the word back. I raised an eyebrow. "Sophie." "The receptionist," he covered quickly. "She's been a huge help at work." I hummed, folding another towel. "I'm sure she has." He didn't catch the edge in my tone. He never did. The loneliness should have broken me, but instead, it forged me. Every cruel word he muttered under his breath, every smirk when he dismissed my boutique became fuel. The more he pulled away, the clearer my path became. By the time he sent that final message announcing his departure, I was already prepared. My lawyer had the divorce petition drafted. My accounts were secure. My house, my grandmother's house, was shielded beyond his reach. He believed he was the master strategist orchestrating his grand escape, but David was playing checkers while I'd been playing chess all along. As I sat alone in my boutique office, surrounded by the faint scent of lavender candles and leather handbags, I glanced at the growing evidence folder beside me. Each page whispered the same promise: "You're ready." David thought betrayal made me weak. He didn't understand that betrayal made me meticulous. The shadows had spoken, and I had listened. The morning after his declaration, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. "Don't try to call me. Sophie and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." The words scrolled across my screen with such arrogance I almost admired the audacity. Almost. I poured coffee into my favorite porcelain mug, the one David always said looked too fancy for everyday use. The steam curled up warm against my face, grounding me. I read the message again, steady as a surgeon. He thought he'd dropped a bomb, but I'd already built the shelter. I remembered the night I'd first met Sophie. It had been the dealership's holiday party lights strung along the ceiling, cheap champagne flowing. She was standing too close to him, her laugh pitched high and eager. When she thought no one was watching her, manicured hand brushed his arm. I saw the spark in his eyes, the thrill of being admired by someone so young, someone who didn't yet recognize his insecurities dressed up as charm. That night, I tucked the observation away like a puzzle piece. Today, it snapped into place. Another text came through, sharp and smug. "This must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." My laugh startled even me. The boutique, my little shop, had quietly surpassed his annual salary 2 years ago. Every designer handbag, every carefully chosen scarf sold was another brick in the empire he had dismissed as a hobby. I opened my laptop screen, glowing in the morning light. With each keystroke, I filed away his messages into the evidence folder. Screenshot, save, label, proof. He was practically writing my case for me. By late afternoon, he escalated. "I've been planning this for months. Sophie understands me in ways you never could. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll find someone more your own age. Already told my family. They agree we grew apart. Nobody's fault, really." I whispered the words aloud, tasting their bitterness, then dragged the files into the neatly labeled texts, admissions folder. "Nobody's fault." My jaw clenched. He wanted me to believe this was natural drift, that betrayal wasn't betrayal if spoken with a shrug. But the hotel receipts in my binder told another story. The gym membership, the dinners, the business trips. It hadn't been drift, it had been design. I opened the wedding album I kept tucked in the back of a drawer. His smile on that day was soft or genuine, untouched by desperation. Now he wore shirts 2 sizes too small, tried slang that made him sound ridiculous, dyed his hair just enough to fool himself, but not me. My heart didn't ache as I closed the album. It steadied. He had chosen a performance over a partnership, and I had chosen foresight over fantasy. Another buzz. "By the way, I used the joint card to book our flights and hotel. Consider it my parting gift. LOL. Perfect." I dialed the credit card company. "This is Anna Harrison. I need to report fraudulent charges and cancel a card immediately." The representative's voice was brisk, but tinged with quiet satisfaction as I listed the expenses: 2 first-class tickets to Miami, a reservation at the Royal Palm Hotel. "And you have documentation?" she asked. I glanced at my phone where David's gloating text still shone. Screenshots from my husband admitting he used our joint card after emptying our bank account. "Understood. We'll reverse the charges immediately. He'll be removed as an authorized user." I hung up, savoring the silence. Tomorrow, he and Sophie would arrive at the airport to find their grand escape canceled, their fantasy unraveling before it began. Later, as I organized invoices for the boutique, my phone buzzed again. "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller." This time I laughed so hard I had to wipe tears from my eyes. My grandmother's house, the one deeded solely to me in my name alone, was untouchable. His ego had grown so bloated, he truly believed he could evict me from my own inheritance. Another message followed. "And the shop? I know it means a lot to you. We can work out a fair payment for my half." I sipped my wine, swirling it in the glass. His half. The boutique had been my creation, my funding, my endless nights. His only contribution had been mockery, calling it a hobby, while I built it into a thriving business. I took another slow drink. Tomorrow, I'd send everything to my lawyer, but tonight I allowed myself a smile. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of David leaving. I was almost grateful. He thought he'd abandoned me, but all he'd really done was free me to step fully into my own strength. I turned off my phone, set down my glass, and whispered to the empty room, "Enjoy Miami, David. You'll need the sunshine because the storm's coming." The next morning, I woke before dawn, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant song of early birds. I brewed coffee dark and strong and sat at the kitchen table with my phone and a stack of documents neatly clipped together. This wasn't panic. It was procedure. I dialed Ms. Grant, my lawyer, who answered on the second ring. "It's time," I said simply. "David made his move," she asked, her voice calm, measured. "He left me a text. He's in Miami with Sophie. Emptied the joint account, charged flights and a hotel to our credit card." There was the faintest pause. "Then he's given us exactly what we need. I'll file the papers today. We'll request an emergency hearing. Meanwhile, forward me those texts." "I already have them saved," I said, scrolling through my evidence folder. Labeled, dated, time-stamped. Her chuckle was low and approving. "Anna, you've done half my work for me." After the call, I rang the bank. My voice didn't waver as I reported the fraudulent transactions. The representative, polite but firm, confirmed that the charges would be reversed and David removed from the account. I imagined him and Sophie wheeling their designer luggage up to the airline counter, only to be told their tickets were invalid. The look on his face would be priceless. A man convinced he was 10 steps ahead, suddenly realizing he hadn't even seen the board. By mid-morning, the boutique was buzzing with customers. The bell over the door jingled as women streamed in, voices warm and bright. To them, it was just another Friday filled with scarves and handbags. To me, it was proof that life didn't stop, because David had decided to torch our marriage in a fit of selfishness. Still in the back office, I checked my phone every hour, screenshotting each new text. "What did you do to the card? The airline won't honor our tickets." "Answer me, Anna. The hotel canceled our reservation. This is vindictive." I smiled, silencing the notifications. His anger wasn't my emergency anymore. Around lunchtime, the phone rang. Barbara, my mother-in-law. I hesitated, then picked up. "Anna, dear." She began, her tone laced with false sweetness. "David told us everything. How controlling you've been. How you froze his accounts and ruined his trip." I arranged handbags in the window display, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said evenly, "Did he also tell you he emptied our joint account, that he charged tickets for himself and his girlfriend on our credit card?" There was a pause. "Well, he said you left him no choice." "Barbara," I interrupted gently, "I have his texts. Screenshots of him bragging about taking our money. Would you like me to read them to you?" Her breath caught. He did seem cruel. That message about your age?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I've been advised to minimize contact during proceedings. Goodbye, Barbara." I hung up before she could reply. Her loyalty was as fickle as David's love. By evening, word spread through mutual friends. Amanda, his sister, texted me snippets of gossip David and Sophie stranded at a budget motel near the airport, arguing loudly in the lobby. His credit cards apparently were maxed out months ago. Sophie's Instagram posts, Once glamorous, now featured blurry selfies, captioned with complaints about bad luck and toxic people. My phone buzzed again with a message from Ms. Grant. Emergency hearing scheduled for Monday. Given his admissions and financial misconduct, will request immediate freezing of assets. Start organizing all supporting documents, bank records, receipts, incorporation papers. The stronger the foundation, the faster he crumbles. I pulled the heavy binder from my desk drawer. Each page was a quiet triumph, every detail a piece of the fortress I had built. Gas receipts that didn't match his claimed whereabouts. Dinner bills for two. Hotel charges on nights he'd sworn to be at the office. The evidence wasn't just paperwork. It was the story of his betrayal, told in numbers and ink, undeniable and unchangeable. That night, the house felt larger than it ever had, the silence almost companionable. I walked through the room, slowly touching the polished banister, the framed photographs, the quilt my grandmother had stitched decades ago. All of it was mine by blood, by inheritance, by law. David had never understood that no matter how loudly he claimed ownership, his words couldn't rewrite the deed. I sat at the dining table with a glass of red wine and pictured him pacing in a motel room, Sophie scrolling furiously through her phone. He had imagined palm trees, ocean views, champagne toasts. Instead, he had mildew on the wallpaper and the gnawing realization that his empire was built on sand. When my phone buzzed again, I didn't even bother to look. His words no longer had power. His cruelty no longer had weight. Every insult, every dismissal was just more evidence in my arsenal. I raised my glass to the quiet house and whispered, "Let him stew. Monday, the real game begins." The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old paper, the kind of scent that clung to authority. I sat straight-backed on the wooden bench outside the courtroom, my binder of evidence balanced on my lap. The morning light filtered in through tall windows, dust motes drifting like tiny ghosts in the air. My heels clicked softly when I stood as the bailiff called our case. David entered with the swagger of a man who still believed the world bent to his will. His shirt was too tight, his jeans too young, his hair slicked with desperation, disguised as gel. Sophie trailed behind him, oversized sunglasses, perched on her nose as though she could hide from the fluorescent reality of a courthouse hallway. When his eyes found me, he smirked, a smug, lopsided curve of his lips that had once charmed me, but now only confirmed his arrogance. He thought I was broken. He thought today would prove his dominance. Instead, it was the beginning of his unraveling. Inside the courtroom, the judge peered over half-moon glasses, her face unreadable but sharp. Ms. Grant, my lawyer, stood beside me, her presence steady as stone. "Your Honor," she began, "we are here today because Mr. Harrison has engaged in deliberate financial misconduct. We present texts in which he admits to emptying the joint account along with documentation of fraudulent use of a joint credit card for travel expenses with his mistress." She handed up the folder, each page carefully tabbed, each exhibit pristine. I watched the judge's brow furrow as she flipped through screenshots of David's messages, his gleeful LOL scrawled across my phone screen like a confession in neon ink. David's attorney, clearly newly retained, cleared his throat. "My client admits to some rash decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been vindictive and calculated. She preemptively moved funds, withheld cooperation." "Calculated," Ms. Grant cut in smoothly. "Prudent, Your Honor. My client safeguarded her separate assets, all legally established before and during the marriage. She documented everything. That's not vindictiveness. That's wisdom." The judge raised her gaze to David. "Do you deny sending these texts?" David shifted in his chair. I was just trying to make a clean break." "By committing financial fraud?" the judge asked dryly. Color crept up his neck. Sophie shifted uncomfortably in the back row. The judge's orders came swiftly, each word slicing through the fantasy David had built. "All joint assets frozen pending further review. Mr. Harrison required to return any funds removed within 24 hours. Prohibition on selling or encumbering the marital home, though documentation already proved it was my separate property. A formal accounting of his financial transactions for the past 12 months. I exhaled slowly, the weight of validation settling over me. David slammed his hand on the table. That money's gone. We spent it already. The judge's eyes narrowed. Then I suggest you find a way to replace it. His attorney placed a warning hand on his arm, but David yanked it free, glaring at me across the room. His eyes no longer held smugness. They burned with fury, confusion, and the dawning realization that his carefully built tower was nothing more than a house of cards. After the hearing, I walked confidently out into the marble-floored hallway, my heels clicking with purpose. Behind me, I heard Sophie's voice, sharp, whining. "David, what are we supposed to do? Now? You promised." His reply was muffled, but I caught the desperation in his tone. The sound of a man whose castle had collapsed in front of him, exposed to the very people he thought he could outsmart. I didn't pause. I didn't look back. The cold marble beneath my heels, the echo of each step was music enough. At lunch, Ms. Grant and I sat across from each other in a cafe near the courthouse. The aroma of roasted coffee beans filled the air. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied. "You handled yourself beautifully," she said. "You didn't flinch, you didn't engage. That matters. He wanted you rattled. You gave him nothing." I sipped my tea, the warmth steadying me. He still thinks he can win. "That's fine," she replied with a small smile. "Let him keep thinking that. Every desperate move he makes gives us more ammunition." I nodded, staring out the window at the bustling street. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt like something I could shape with my own hands. That evening at home, I gathered the paperwork the court had requested, each document sliding neatly into place. Receipts, bank statements, the boutique's incorporation records, all of it proof that my life, my livelihood, and my legacy were mine alone. David had thought betrayal would break me. Instead, it had fortified me. When my phone buzzed again, I let it ring unanswered. His voice, his anger no longer had a place in my home. I poured myself a glass of wine, stood in front of the mirror, and whispered to my reflection, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." The days after the hearing unfolded like a slow-motion avalanche. Everything David had scrambled to protect came crashing down around him piece by piece until there was nothing left but the wreckage of his own arrogance. Word spread quickly through town. Small communities have long memories, and gossip moves faster than wildfire. The once charming salesman with a perfect smile was now whispered about in coffee shops and grocery aisles. Customers at my boutique lowered their voices when they mentioned his name. Sympathy laced in their eyes, not for him, but for me. Ironically, that sympathy translated into business. Women who had heard the story came in specifically to show support. Some bought scarves, they didn't need handbags they'd been eyeing, but never justified before. "Stay strong, Anna," they'd say as they slid their cards across the counter. I always smiled back, grateful, but inside I thought, strength isn't something you buy. It's something you build. Meanwhile, David's carefully constructed image was unraveling. Sophie's once glamorous social media full of filtered sunsets and coy smiles began to sour. Posts of lavish dinners and beachside cocktails gave way to grainy motel room selfies. Captions shifted from hearts and champagne glasses to complaints about betrayal, toxicity, and people who can't keep their promises. Amanda, his sister, called one evening, her voice heavy. "Anna, I don't know what to say. He told us you were cold, controlling, that you drove him away. But then we saw those texts, the way he bragged about taking your money. That's not the brother I thought I knew." I listened, polite but distant. Their sudden clarity didn't erase the sting of their earlier accusations. Family loyalty had blinded them, but now, as his mask slipped, they realized the truth I'd known for months. Barbara called too, her voice breaking. "He said such awful things about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him better than that. I thought I did." Her regret was genuine, but it was no longer my burden. "I appreciate the call, Barbara," I said gently, "but this is between David and me. I need space. She sniffled. Of course, dear. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. I ended the call and sat in silence, staring at the framed photo on my mantle, me and David at the start of our marriage, smiles, bright hands clasped. It felt like a relic from another life, one I no longer recognized. David, meanwhile, was grasping at straws. He tried calling, texting, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between rage and pleading. You ruined everything, one message spat. I never meant to hurt you, another whispered hours later. We can fix this. You don't have to destroy me. I forwarded each one to Ms. Grant without reply. Every word was another brick in the wall between us, another piece of evidence of his instability. His desperation bled into his work life, too. At the dealership, whispers circulated about his relationship with Sophie. Human Resources launched an investigation. A formal reprimand followed. The promotion he had been expecting evaporated, handed instead to someone with a cleaner record and steadier hand. When he tried to claim age discrimination, HR added that complaint to his file like another nail in the coffin of his career. Sophie didn't last long after that. Living with David in her cramped studio apartment wasn't the romantic escape she'd imagined. The thrill of stolen nights faded quickly when faced with overdue bills and the sour stench of failure. She broke things off, posting a final message online about lessons learned and moving on. David was left alone, the motel replaced by his childhood bedroom in Barbara's house. 45 years old, back under his mother's roof, his once proud image of success stripped bare. One Saturday, as I arranged a new window display, a customer leaned across the counter. My ex tried the same thing, she confided, sliding her card for a designer handbag. Thought he could take everything in the divorce. Men like that never expect us to be smarter than them. I smiled, handing her the bag. Preparation is everything. She nodded, eyes shining. Exactly. Moments like that reminded me I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. My boutique became a quiet beacon for women who had endured betrayal, each transaction a testament to resilience. Through mutual friends, I heard about David's latest blunders. A foray into online gambling had drained what little savings he had left. A pyramid scheme promised him riches but delivered only humiliation. Every attempt to claw his way back ended with him deeper in the hole, still blaming everyone else. Me, Sophie, his boss, the judge. Amanda stopped by the boutique one afternoon. She stood awkwardly among the racks of dresses, her fingers brushing the fabric. We're not defending him anymore, she admitted. We can't. He did this to himself. I simply nodded. She left with a scarf, though I think what she really wanted was absolution. At night, I sometimes replayed his first cruel text in my mind, the gleeful ha-ha, as he announced he had emptied our account. That word, so casual, so cruel, had once stung like a blade. Now it fueled me. Every decision I made, every plan I laid, was sharpened by the memory of his arrogance. The fallout wasn't just his, it was mine too. But while his collapse left him broken, mine left me unburdened. The storm had passed, and I was still standing. 6 months after the hearing, spring leaned its shoulder against the windows of my boutique and pushed in light. The morning smelled like fresh paint and brewed coffee. Tissue paper rustled like small applause as my staff unboxed a shipment of leather totes. We'd just signed a lease for a second location, a sunlit corner space near the farmer's market, and the ribbon cutting drew neighbors with paper cups and camera phones. When the scissors clicked, it sounded like a door closing on a dark room I no longer needed to enter. David didn't come to mind much, except when paperwork required his name. The final settlement had moved slowly, then all at once Ms. Grant guiding me through each clause with the calm of a pilot landing in weather. The order arrived on a Thursday. I stood at the kitchen counter, bare feet on cool tile, and read it 3 times. The house mine, confirmed. The boutique mine, as it always had been. Joint account withdrawals traced and reimbursed. His latest claims, something about moral support entitling him to half my dream, rejected without ceremony. I exhaled so deeply, my chest ached. A week later, Barbara asked to meet for coffee. She wore a cardigan the color of rain and twisted her napkin to ribbons. I'm sorry, she said, eyes rimmed pink. For what I said. For believing him. He learned that arrogance somewhere, but I didn't think he'd wield it like a weapon. Her voice thinned. We told him he can't blame you anymore. Or Sophie. Or the judge. You're his mother, I said gently. Loyalty is a reflex. Accountability is a choice. She nodded, tears catching on her lashes, and slipped 2 gift cards for my store across the table, one for her, one for Amanda. A small gesture, but honest. Summer sharpened the air and business bloomed. We launched an online shop. Orders chimed my phone with bell-toned joy at all hours. One afternoon, the door chime rang and Sophie stepped in. She looked smaller, without the bravado. No sunglasses, no curated angles, just a young woman with bitten cuticles and a tremor in her voice. I owe you an apology, she said, standing at the edge of the register like someone visiting a grave. He told me you were cold, controlling, jealous. And then he tried those words on me, when the money didn't appear, when the apartment felt too small. I'm sorry, Anna. I was wrong. Anger didn't rise. Pity did, but not the kind that carries condescension. A gentler kind that knows how mistakes are made. We're all somebody's cautionary tale, I said. I hope you become your own success story. She smiled, relieved, almost reverent, and left with a modest scarf and lighter shoulders. Autumn arrived with cinnamon on its breath. A local business magazine asked to feature the boutique. The reporter wanted juicy quotes about betrayal. I gave her inventory cycles and hiring practices and the stubborn power of community. She still found her angle. Preparation is not paranoia. It's love for your future self. I clipped the article and taped it beside the framed screenshot I kept in my office. Not the cruelest message David ever sent, but the one where he'd laughed as he announced he'd emptied our account. The frame didn't itch anymore. It steadied me like a lighthouse steadies sailors, not a destination, just a promise that I'd never again sail blind. On the anniversary of the emergency hearing, Ms. Grant called to say the court had denied David's final petition without a hearing. He keeps trying to rewrite the ending, she said, amused. Paper doesn't forgive the ink. Through the grapevine, I learned he'd moved into a small apartment above a garage, traded his billboard smile for a cubicle at a different dealership. He'd grown quieter, they said. Or maybe gossip simply prefers the shape of a rise or a spectacular fall, and a flat line doesn't travel far. 1 year out, we opened a 3rd location. I bought a suit the color of cedar bark and practiced a speech I never gave. When faced with a crowd, I always choose gratitude over grandstanding. During the reception, a young couple lingered by the glass case fingers, laced questions, tumbling out about LLCs and separate finances. I walked them through what Ms. Grant had walked me through. It's not about distrust, I said. It's about clarity. Clarity is kindness, even especially when the heart is involved. Barbara visited the new store looking 10 years lighter. She bought a dress the shade of sunrise and squeezed my hands. Thank you, she said, for showing us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. Amanda came too eventually with a daughter who tried on headbands and mispronounced sequins as sequins. I sent her home with a glittering crown and a discount card. The child bowed solemnly like a tiny monarch. 2 years out, someone from a women's business conference called. Would I speak about building and protecting a brand? I stood on a stage dotted with light and told a room full of strangers that the boring things save you the spreadsheet at midnight, the notarized page, the slow strength of telling the truth only to the people who can help. After, in the hallway, a woman with paint on her hands said, "My husband calls me paranoid for keeping our studio rent separate." I shook my head. Your art needs a roof that doesn't leak. Protect the roof. Back home that night, Main Street glowed like a string of lanterns. I sat on my porch steps with a mug of peppermint tea. The garden breathed tomatoes and basil into the dark. In the upstairs window, my office lamp glowed over the framed screenshot and the magazine clipping. The house felt less like a fortress now and more like a friend. Sometimes I think about the woman fastening a necklace for Mrs. Daniels as her life detonated on a screen. I want to tell her that the worst moment will be the first clean step, that one paper can halt a sale, one phone call can reverse a charge, one spine can hold up a life. I want to tell her that success won't taste like triumph over anyone else, but like oxygen, invisible and essential. If you're listening and something in this story sits heavy on your chest, if you're standing in a quiet room with a phone that just set fire to your plans, know this: the boring steps matter. Save the statements, learn the terms, ask for help. Choose the version of yourself who sleeps easily 6 months from now. And if this story gave you even a stitch of steadiness, share it with someone who might need a steadying stitch too. Leave a comment with the moment you realized preparation is love, not fear. And if you want to hear more stories where justice doesn't shout, but stands its ground, subscribe. We'll keep the light on for you.